order to truly grasp the critical path method (CPM) employed in any project, it's crucial to first understand its core concept. Familiarize yourself with what it entails, its development process, and the team members responsible for its implementation. Acknowledge its importance and its role as a crucial instrument in project management. Spend some time exploring each of these elements to fully appreciate the utility and worth of the CPM. The critical path method in construction. The critical path method (CPM) in construction is a project management technique that helps plan and schedule tasks, identifying the longest sequence of tasks in a project that must be completed on time for the project to meet its deadline. What is a critical path diagram? A critical path diagram is a visual representation of a project's timeline. It illustrates the sequence of tasks, their dependencies, and the critical path, which is the longest sequence of dependent tasks that must be completed on time to complete the project within the deadline. How do you identify a critical path? First, list all tasks or activities and identify all the tasks or activities required to complete the project. Second, determine dependencies and identify which tasks depend on others to be completed before they can start. Third, draw the network diagram and create a visual representation of the tasks and their dependencies. Fourth, estimate task duration. Determine the time each task will take to complete. Fifth, identify the critical path in the network diagram. Find the longest path of tasks from start to finish. This is your critical path. The last one is to update the critical path. As the project progresses, the critical path can change, so it's important to regularly review and update it. Now that we know about the CPM or critical path method, we can now proceed in creating a network diagram. When using the critical path method for networking, the following steps need to be taken. Construct a project network, perform forward and backward passes, determine project completion, calculate slack values. State the critical path we are going to use this node convention, where A represents an individual activity or task in the project. The letter T is for the estimated time duration required to complete an activity. ES represents the earliest possible time at which an activity can be completed, and EF represents the earliest finish time in which an activity can be completed, while LS denotes the latest possible time in which an activity can start without delaying the project's overall duration. And last, the LF, which represents the latest possible time at which an activity can be completed without delaying the project's overall duration. Network diagrams frequently employ node convention like A, T, ES, EF, LS, and LF to convey details about the activities, their durations, and the scheduling constraints associated with them. They support team members and project manager in comprehending the order and timing of project activities.
SMR Innovations Company Ltd is a company that uses critical path method in order to meet production on time. The new project focuses on building a hotel near beachside. The project details, including the estimated cost of materials, contractor for site clearing the property papers, has been settled. Foundation plan in the blueprint of the structural plan has been approved. The electrical works has been contacted and will be informing the details as well as the interior design and floor planning of the new hotel near beachside. Now, let's create a network diagram for a given data. This is the activity given data and the legend we are using for computing network diagram. Activity A can begin at the start, as it has no predecessors. Activities B and C need activity A to be completed before they can start. Activities D and E depends on the completion of activity B. Activity F depends on the completion of activity C. Activity G depends on the completion of E and D. After completing activity E and F, activity H depends on the completion of both E and F. Activity I depends on the completion of both activities G and H. Since activity I has no successors, it marks the end of the sequence. Now, let's perform a forward pass by analyzing the project network diagram from the beginning to the end, calculating the earliest start and the earliest finish time for each activity. This process ensures that the project progresses efficiently and identifies the quickest path to completion. By utilizing the forward pass, we establish the minimum project duration and pinpoint critical milestone, enabling precise and proactive project planning. Every activity or task has its own duration or time. Now, let's proceed with activity A. Since it has no predecessors, its earliest time ES is 0. Given its duration of 5 days, we calculate the earliest finish time EF as 0 plus 5, which give us 5. Activity B cannot start until activity A has been completed. Since the earliest finish time of activity A is 5, the earliest time of activity B will be 5. With a duration of 10 days, we calculate the finish time of activity B as 5 plus 10, which give us 15. Activity C also depends on activity A, being completed before it can start. Given that earliest finish time of activity A is 5, activity C can start with a duration of 13 days. We calculate the earliest finish time of activity C as 5 plus 13, which give us 18. Activity D depends on the completion of activity B. Since activity B finishes at time 15, activity D can start then. With a duration of 7 days, the earliest finish time of activity D is 15 plus 7, which give us 22. Activity E also depends on the completion of activity B, so it can start at time 15. With a duration of 3 days, the earliest finish time of activity E is 15 plus 3, which give us 18. Activity F depends on the completion of activity C. Since activity C finishes at time 18, activity F can start then. With a duration of 9 days, the earliest finish time of activity F is 18 plus 9, which give us 27. Activity G depends on both activities D and E. Since both activities D and E finish at time 22 and 18 respectively, activities G can start at the latest of these times, which is 22, with a duration of 4 days. The earliest finish time of activity G is 22 plus 4, which give us 26. Activity H depends on both activities E and F. Since both activities E and F finish at time 18 and 27 respectively, activity H can start at the latest of these times, which is 27. With a duration of 3 days, the earliest finish time of activity H is 27 plus 3, which give us 30. Activity I depends on both activities G and H. Since both activities G and H finish at time 26 and 30 respectively, activity I can start at the latest of these times, which is 30. With a duration of 7 days, the earliest finish time of activity I is 30 plus 7, which give us 37. Now that we have calculated the earliest start and finish times for each activity, we have established the critical path and the minimum project duration. This information is crucial for efficient project management and scheduling. Now the backward pass helps determine the latest start, LS, and the finish, LF, times for each activity. This process identifies the maximum amount of time each activity can be delayed without delaying the project's completion. We'll start with activity I. LF is set to the EF, earliest finish time, calculated during the forward pass, which is 37. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity I, 7 weeks, from its LF. 37 minus 7 is equal to 30. In activity H, LF is set to the minimum LS of its successor, which is activity I, with LS 30. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity H, 3 weeks, from its LF. 30 minus 3 is equal to 27. Activity G, LF is set to the minimum LS of its successor, which is also activity I, with LS 30. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity G, 4 weeks, from its LF. 30 minus 4 is equal to 26. In activity F, LF is set to the LS of its successor, activity H, which is 27. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity F, 9 weeks, from its LF. 27 minus 9 is equal to 18. For activities D and E, their LF is the same as LS of their common successor, activity G, which is 26. Therefore, their LS is LF minus their duration, T, which give us 26 minus 7 is equal to 19 for activity D. And 26 minus 3 is equal to 23 for activity E. Activity C, LF is set to the LS of its successor, activity F, which is 18. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity C, 13 weeks, from its LF. 18 minus 13 is equal to 5. In activity B, LF is set to the minimum LS of its successor, activities D and E, which is R 19 and 24 respectively. LS is calculated by subtracting the duration of activity B, 10 weeks, from its LF. 19 minus 10 is equal to 9. And lastly, activity A. LF is set to the minimum LS of its successor, activities B and C, which are 9 and 5 respectively. LS is calculated by subtracting the durations of activity A, 5 weeks, from its LF. 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. This backward pass helps us identify the maximum amount of time each activity can be delayed without delaying the project completion. It also helps us identify the total slack or float time for each activity, which indicate the flexibility in the project schedule. For slack, or also known as float, is a term used in project management to measure the amount of time an activity can be delayed without causing a delay to overall project completion date. It represents the flexibility within the project schedule. Calculate free slack. Subtract the latest finish time, LF, or earliest finish time, EF, of the current activity from the earliest start time, ES, of its successor activity or activities. For A, let's subtract ES minus LS or EF minus LF. 0 minus 0 or 5 minus 5. Therefore, our slack is 0. For B, our slack is 4. For C is 0. For D is 4. For E is 8. For F is 0. For G is 4. For H is 0. And lastly, I is 0. Slack measures how much time an activity can be delayed without causing delays to the overall project. Let's see how much wiggle room each activity has in our project. Activity A has no flexibility. It must finish on time to keep the project on track. Activity B can be delayed by 4 days without affecting the project's timeline. Like activity A, activity C must finish on time to avoid delays. Activities F, H, and I, these activities are also have no flexibility and must be completed on time. Activities D, E, and G can each be delayed by 8 and 4 days, respectively, without causing delays to the project. Free slack help us identify which activity can be delayed and which must be completed on time to ensure the project stays on track. Based on the free slack conclusion provided, the critical path can be determined by identifying the sequence of activities with zero free slack. In these cases, the critical path consists of activities with no flexibility in their schedules. Therefore, the critical path is A, C, F, H, and I. These activities must be completed on time to ensure the project is completed within the shortest possible duration. Any delay in these activities will directly delay the project's overall completion time. It's essential to closely monitor and manage the critical path activities to ensure the project stays on schedule. And that is how to construct a critical path method network diagram. Thank you all guys for watching, and we hope you found our presentation valuable.